very good evening and welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. The good news in the last few weeks has been that inflation is cooling down and will continue to cool down. But it's a different story for food inflation. For those running households and running kitchens, it's become difficult. A steep jump in prices of ordinary everyday items is beginning to pinch. For example, a 25% jump in jeera and turmeric prices. Chillies at 200 rupees a kilo, while tomatoes, we all know, have become the new gold, selling at over 150 rupees a kilo. And if you're a lover of adrak chai, then brace up for 350 rupees per kg shock for ginger. Household budgets have clearly gone for a toss this monsoon as prices of vegetables and spices shoots up. This after claims that inflation is being tamed, slipping to a more than 2-year low of 4.25% in May 2023. But whatever the data may claim, the ground reality is pretty different, that vegetable prices are in fact burning a hole in the common man's pocket. Take a look at this ground report of what's happening in the mandi.
Tomato prices have increased in the last couple of weeks. As you can see right here in the Dadar market at this point, tomato prices are ranging anywhere between 110 rupees to 150 rupees. And the reason behind this sort of inflation, especially across the board in vegetables, is being given to be the heat wave, delayed monsoon, which has actually affected the crops as well as supply chain. Now, many consumers are here and buying tomatoes, but what these vendors have told us that earlier they were selling about 90 kgs per day. Now they're unable to sell even 30 kgs per day.
अभी तो काफ़ी महंगा साबित हो रहा है, सब मार्केट ही ये इतना महंगा हो रहा है, लेकिन खेती करने वाले भी क्या करेंगे कि बारिश के मौसम में उनको भी करना ज़रूरी होता है, क्योंकि उनको जो रेट मिलना चाहिए वो रेट उनको मिलता है नहीं.
Well, that's the word coming in from some of the buyers here, but let's get in a word from the vendors who have been talking about how they've been unable to procure large amounts of tomatoes.
100 किलो तक बिक जाता था, अभी 50 किलो भी नहीं बिकता, 50 किलो भी नहीं बिकता है.
तो इतने दिन आपको टमाटर खरीदने में कोई तकलीफ हुई?
नहीं, टमाटर मिलता है, सुबह जल्दी लेना पड़ता है तो मिलता है.
हाँ, तो बट कुछ कमी नजर आई आपको होलसेल में?
नहीं, कुछ कम नहीं हुआ है. अभी रेट
किलो से आप 30 किलो भी नहीं, 50 किलो.
हाँ, नहीं बिकता.
Well, that's the word coming in from the vendor as well here in the wholesale market in Dadar.
Suddenly, the prices of tomato have increased. Right now, we are reporting from Vittal market of Bhopal, where we will directly interact to the tomato seller. He will tell that what all the price he has decided, and today what price going on in Bhopal. आज ये बताइए, टमाटर जो है चर्चा बना हुआ है. आज टमाटर का भाव क्या है?
160 रुपए किलो टमाटर.
अरे 160 रुपए भैया, ये बताओ, अब पिछले हफ्ते 30, 40, 20 रुपए किलो टमाटर कई जगह तो फिर रहा था.
टमाटर क्या, अपने फसल उस वक्त ज्यादा थी, ये बारिश होने से जो है कि अपने यहाँ की फसल खराब हो गई. ये सब वो टमाटर से मुराद नहीं है. आप धनिया मिर्ची जो सब्जी के अंदर जो अपन डालते हैं मेन, वो भी महंगा है. आप कोई भी सब्जी पूछेंगे तो भटे भरते के 150 रुपए किलो, लौकी 60 रुपए किलो, प्याज हो गई सब 30 रुपए किलो.
You know, the prices of tomatoes, if we talk about, they have hiked. You have come here just to buy it. What was the earlier price, ma'am, and what do you have to say on the price?
Earlier price was almost 3 times less, almost 30 rupees a kg. I had to come to this place only because I had to buy tomatoes. They are skyrocketing at this moment. All the vegetables have gone sky high, and I don't expect this thing from Modi in this country.
टमाटर हमने कल लिया था 2500 रुपये का रेट का, आज इस पर सीधे सीधे आधे पैसे उतर गए, 1200 रुपये का रेट. अब ये रह गया 1300 रुपये का रेट का. ये लॉस हमें ही हो रहा है. बताओ, थोड़ा सा महंगा होते ही महंगा ले लिया, अब बाजार गिर गए तो घाटा हो गया हमें. कम से कम ना तो हमें 30-40 हज़ार रुपये का नुकसान है आज में.
असर ये है, बारिश से तो कोई दिक्कत है नहीं. जो सीजन है वो पिछला सीजन खत्म हो चुका है. नई फसल आई है, टमाटर कम है इसलिए महंगा. ज़्यादा 1 हफ्ते रहेगा महंगा, फिर उसके बाद में अपनी जगह टमाटर हो जाएगा. कोई ऐसी बात नहीं है.
बिना टमाटर के हमसे तो कोई सब्जी बनती नहीं है. पंजाबी लोग हैं, हमें तो बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत होती है, इसलिए जिस रेट भी मिलेंगे हमें लेने पड़ेंगे.
I don't know about just Punjabis, but everyone needs tomatoes in their diet, and it's become an overall very expensive affair. Now, we're trying to understand the causes of this, how long it will last, and impact on inflation. What are the kind of numbers we're going to see? Next print we're going to see, when will this really start showing? Siraj Hussain, former Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare and co-promoter of Arcus Policy Research, is with me on the show. I'm speaking this evening with Mitali Nikore, founder and economist at Nikore Associates, and Garima Kapoor, chief economist at Elara Capital. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us on the India Development Debate. Mr. Hussain, is this as simple as a seasonal issue which goes away? Because this time round, the sense is that the price rise is sharp, it's quite sudden, and it's across the board. We've been talking only about tomatoes, but in a whole host of other perishables, we have seen this kind of a trend.
Some of the price rise, Tamanna, is due to rains in certain parts of India and deficient rains in some other parts of India. But also in case of tomato, we should remember that the cost of production of tomato is about 10 to 15 rupees a kilogram. And only in March and April this year, the farmers were not able to sell their tomatoes even at 5 rupees a kilogram. So obviously, it is possible that many farmers did not go in for tomato, and I do not know what will happen in the Kharif crop, because the main crop of tomato is Rabi. So if the farmers face so much of fluctuation, then obviously they are dissuaded. As far as other commodities are concerned, jeera, for example, jeera production has definitely been lower, and the carryover stocks are also much lower than last year. So I think jeera prices will continue to remain high.
What is the sort of reason for an overall increase? We're hearing about chilies, and I'm coming back to you, Mr. Hussain, on this. Chilies at 300 rupees, peas at 130 to 150 rupees. Overall, an increase between 30 to 35%. Once again, is this the regular seasonal issue? Is this because of late monsoons and then heavy monsoons? And are we going to see this deepening, or does this all go away in the next couple of weeks?
Actually, monsoon has not been very heavy. In fact, monsoon is deficient in many parts of India, especially in eastern India. East UP, Bihar, etc. have highly deficient rainfall. So it is not due to rainfall across India. You see, what happens is that many a times the local situation determines transportation, etc. And these are highly perishable commodities. Tomatoes, for example, cannot be stored in cold storages. We do not have facilities for transportation through cold chain. So these are the factors which affect the prices at the local level in certain parts of the year. I think if the monsoon continues to be if the monsoon turns out to be better than what is being expected due to El Nino, I think the prices will cool down, and prices I do not see coming down, but I think prices of other perishables, vegetables, etc. will cool down.
Prices will cool down. What is going to be the impact overall on inflation? Let me come to Mitali Nikore on this, because the story so far has been a relief on inflation. You know, we've overall been talking about how inflation is beginning to cool off. We've had a great print for the month of May. How soon and how much do you see this impacting inflation numbers?
So first of all, thanks a lot, Tamanna, for having me on the show. I think, when we look at the overall inflationary trends, the RBI has done a phenomenal job in, managing the inflation within the bands that are set, the 3 to 6% band. And we are somewhere at around 4.75 in May, June. And definitely this will have, this will dent the RBI efforts. And we will start to see a creeping up inflation, because food inflation accounts for almost 1/3 to half in any month. And typically in a month like this, when the food inflation has rocketed so much, so quickly, definitely maybe a 25 to 30 basis points increase is possible in overall inflation. But I think the story here is not just about this episode of food inflation or this episode of food inflation impacting inflation overall. but to look at some of the systemic factors that are driving this. The speaker before me, he of course mentioned some of the issues like logistics and cold storage. That is definitely one of the issues, but the issues are not just infrastructure related. The issues are also rooted in the pricing of of goods at the state levels, and they're also rooted in not sufficient amount of technology to track these prices, to track production of essential commodities. There was a price monitoring mechanism for top commodities, that is tomatoes, onion, and potatoes, that was launched by the Ministry of Food a few years ago in 2020, and that has been active, but we need much more of that for other commodities, and even that is just tracking prices. We need to be tracking production. We need to be looking at where is the production high, which state can it be transported very quickly to another state. Can we look at more cold storage facilities, and not just cold storage but also ambient temperature storage, because with more and more climate change, we are going to start seeing the requirement for ambient temperature storage as well. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done on the infrastructure side, on the policy side, and with technology to actually manage the prices of agricultural commodities as a whole. And this is what these episodes of inflation should drive policymakers and governments to do.
So, it's a supply management issue which we've not found a solution to, or is this unseasonal or late rains? Garima, Kapoor, how do you look at this and how do you look at the impact? Because what is surprising here is the sudden shoot up of prices. We know that there is a pain for a few weeks around the monsoons. We cover it every single year. But the scale at which prices have shot up is definitely concerning this time round.
You're right, Tamanna. Two things have actually happened. If you go back and look at the months of April and May, nearly 10 to 12 states of India received unseasonal rains, where the average rainfall was much higher than what you normally see in terms of long-term deviation. So clearly there were rains, but they were rains at an untimely period, number one. Number two, prior to this, they were preceded by extreme heat wave, which has kind of become a phenomena in the month of March. And then, although monsoon has arrived, you do have patchy rainfalls, as Mr. One of your other panelists also indicated that there have been deficiency on the eastern part of India. So all of these factors are together contributing to what we are seeing. The sudden spike can actually be explained by the fact that this tomatoes are generally a rabi crop. And by the time the next crop will be available, that is going to be at least till the month of August end. That means you will continue to see the spike, and there's no incremental supply that is coming in the market because the standing crop probably has got damaged. And until 3 months ago, there weren't sufficient efficient pricing mechanism by which the farmers could really earn good returns. So all these factors have actually contributed. While I do concur with my other panelists that you need to work on supply solutions, logistics, storage, and efficient pricing mechanism and tracking of production across the states, I think for now, our policy relating to perishables, etc., continues to remain very, very patchy. Although we have a significant focus on management of cereal inflation, we still haven't found a good solution for management of perishable inflation. Now, vegetables are close to about 6% of India's CPI. A basket of vegetables 6 to 7 that I track are already up 16% in the month of July, and the prices have increased further here on. So clearly, it is not going to be a good news. Clearly, CPI trend, which was on a downward trajectory, will see an ugly spike. However, I would believe that this is going to be transient. I don't think a Monetary Policy Committee and RBI will look at this as something which is going to be more enduring in nature. They will look through this effect because one, we do see a seasonal effect quite often every time this year, just that the intensity is quite severe. And second, as the Kharif crop probably starts to arrive, especially of certain commodities for which the challenge has been of damages, particularly perishables, you should start to see some moderation. Now, if I exclude the food basket and particularly the perishables basket, the story global all continues to be quite encouraging when it comes to inflation. There are clear signs that your manufacturing inflation, your inflation that is contributed by fuel, etc., is starting to trend downwards. You might see a petrol and diesel price cut soon because the OMCs have recovered their profitability. So I will not worry too much. While it is not a great news when it comes to your managing your purses and managing your monthly budgets for consumers, at the policy level, I don't think policymakers, particularly RBI and MPC, will react to this very strongly. They'll
To
remain
this,
on wait and watch mode.
specifically to this, Garima, there's one school of thought that the RBI may push forward its price cut decision because of such factors. Or do you think it will make no difference at all?
Tamanna, anyway, my base case is that RBI is not going to cut its rate hikes throughout this calendar year. Because remember, there is a forecast for El Nino. While there are different schools of thoughts and different climate experts that are saying that positive Indian Ocean dipole should counter the El Nino impact, and there is very little evidence in history for the last 25 years that average inflation in El Nino ends up being higher than in neutral years. In fact, it's the opposite. I think a central banker would like to wait and watch its impact play out through the season. So I anyway don't think, irrespective of what's happening currently over the last 2 to 3 weeks, that a central bank would have felt comfortable, or the Monetary Policy Committee would have felt comfortable going ahead with rate cuts unless there was a durable sign of reduction, mainly for non-food as well as food, which I think becomes only clear after the El Nino impact is played out and be very clear as to what impact it has had on the output in general.
El Nino might be a bigger issue than the current sort of rise and spike. But Mr. Siraj Hussain, I want to come to you on the management, the supply chain management issue, which both Mitali, Nikore and Garima Kapoor raised. That while we have a clearer path for cereals, when it comes to perishable commodities like vegetables, etc., it's still very patchy. And this is why you're seeing the sudden reaction of retail prices. Where do you think we need to plug the loophole?
For certain vegetables which are highly perishable in nature, tomato is an example, the consumption has to take place within a few days of the harvesting of tomato. It cannot wait for too long. There are many other horticultural commodities, for example, potato, for example, apples, etc., which can be stored for a longer period of time. So the government of India has been providing grant for setting up of cold chain units. Ministry of Food Processing has a scheme under which a grant of up to 10 crores is provided, and not only for cold storage but also for reefer trucks, for cooling houses, etc., for cooling chambers, and a lot of investment has come into that, and that is why there is reasonably more stability in case of prices of potato as compared to onion and tomato. However, in case of onion, I can say that we are waiting for a technological breakthrough. Tomato is very difficult to help because tomato is so highly perishable. But in case of onion, we may see a technological breakthrough. The point is that so much of money is flowing into startups and so on, and the business channels are discussing it all the time. But somehow we have not seen a major technological breakthrough in the storage of many of these commodities, and onion is a very good example.
I think that's an interesting point, Mr. Siraj Hussain, because a lot of new businesses have been focusing on delivering a niche segment their orders within 10 minutes. But those orders need to be available and of fresh quality through the year. Just to come to that point which you made earlier, Mitali, Nikore, on the supply chain management, how do other countries manage this? What can we really start doing? Because while and admittedly, everyone sitting on this panel is not going to, beyond a point, be hurt too much if you pay large sums of money relatively or higher prices for tomato, but many people in this country will be suffering and nutrition will be cut from their diets, and that is also a huge issue.
So in fact, Tamanna, I'm so glad that we're talking about solutions. There's a very simple tech-based solution that can really work, and it has worked in several countries, even in Brazil, Mexico. So I'm not just talking about developed economies, but even comparable emerging economies have deployed tech-based solutions to track the production, consumption, and distribution of agricultural goods. In our case, we have agricultural mandis, where a very large proportion of agricultural produce of various kinds of commodities comes, is weighed, and that is sort of the thoroughfare for those goods to then go into markets. Now, imagine if those mandis were digitized and we could actually digitally track on a national or at least a state level database where the goods are coming from and then where they are going on a real time basis, we would be able to minimize shortages in the areas where distribution is not going through. And of course, just quickly reacting to one of the points, yes, there has been a lot of investment that has come into cold chains, but that has been restricted to a couple of states. There's a need to redistribute the cold chain investment across the country and ensure that some of the areas which are not receiving that investment should also through additional incentive schemes, etc., government can actually direct investment towards those areas from the private sector, by subsidizing. And then I think the third point is that one of the other panelists also talked about that this is seasonal and it's obviously not going to last. We agree, the impacts of these inflationary pressures are seasonal and they will pass through and average out over time. So the impact should not be that high. But if we observe the impacts of climate change and if we see the frequency of heat waves increasing, if we see the frequency of climate disasters increasing, then these things which are transient today will become bigger threats in the very near future. And therefore, we need to plan for climate resilient distribution, supply chains, and storage facilities, which don't just take into account, El Nino that we are talking about right now, but other climatic events which are, there are possibilities of them occurring. And that's why these tech-based solutions to track the distribution and supply chains are so critical to ensure that you don't have those kind of shortages coming up in one area and then wastage of tomatoes or other perishable commodities in another area.
Also the importance of policy intervention. So we have now at least two states, the states of West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, which are providing in their fair price shops some of these vegetables at subsidized rates. Garima, Kapoor, that's the other impact. State budgets also get burdened. After a point, it's the imperative of the government to provide these things at a fair price, at least to those in need.
I agree with you, Tamanna. The responsibility of state becomes an increasing revenue expenditure for states, which is really not accounted for that. However, if I just go by the trend, what's happening in states of India, especially those who have seen elections this year, are going to see elections this year, the states are already providing, some of them, apart from free paddy and free wheat, which is subsidized by the government of India, they're also providing edible oils, they're providing spices, they're also providing things like pulses. So the responsibility of a welfare state is only becoming larger as inflation is becoming a concern. However, I must point this out to you. The government's mechanism of management of prices for particularly cereals and pulses has worked very well over the last few years, as well as their entire focus on increasing output of certain specific commodities like pulses or oilseeds is going to pay us dividends. In fact, we had a deflationary scenario in pulses from a very high inflation scenario a few years ago. So I think the policy interventions are there. But when it comes to state finances, I would say beyond these two commodities, states are now becoming a supplier or subsidized supplier of everything, right from food to LPG to free electricity to milk and so on and so forth. So I would really worry about states, whether or not some of these states were intervening through policy, mainly because that is also constraining states' ability to spend on capex, and that is another worry from a top-down perspective for macro in India.
Absolutely. So it's a bigger issue than, people wondering how to replace tomato in their everyday recipes. This is something that we need to plan for at a policy level and not just assume that we can wash away these kind of price hikes and spikes in the next few days. Thank you so much to all of you for truly an engaging and in-depth conversation on the humble tomato and more. We'll take a very short break, but a lot more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.